Hello everyone, this is Sage. Welcome to the Executive Corner Expert Talks by Kalkine TV. Today's special guest is Mr. Andrew McConville, the CEO of the Australian Petroleum Production and Exploration Association. UK, Europe and the US are seeing significant increases in their energy prices, and Australia is one of the major exporters of liquid natural gas. How will the energy crunch being experienced in the Northern Hemisphere affect Australian liquid natural gas supply and prices? Well, today's expert will share some insights from running an Australian organisation whose vision is energy for a better Australia and whose aim is to be the effective voice of the oil and gas industry on the issues that matter, working collaboratively with the industry and the community. So we bring to you the industry leaders, successful business owners, all under the one roof to help you discover the insights of the stock market. So today we're very lucky to share some space with Mr. Andrew McConville, CEO of the Australian Petroleum Production and Exploration Association, or APPEA. It's a pleasure to meet you, Andrew.
Thanks, Sage. Very, very good to be here. Thank you.
Thanks for making time for Kalkine TV. Now, the commodities have been catching the investors' attention with the rally in the prices of crude oil and other metals. Could you explain APPEA's role in the Australian commodity sector, please?
Yeah, sure. I mean, APPEA does represent the upstream oil and gas sector, so explorers and producers. And, what I really want to stress here is the size and significance of the Australian oil and gas industry. We represent about 3% of GDP and about 11% of Australia's total exports. We employ about 80,000 people and many, many hundreds of thousands more through the value chain that depend on oil and gas. And I mean, just recently we did some work where we looked at the scope of the opportunity that's before the industry, and we did some work with EY, and if we can get the growth settings right, we see an extra $350 billion worth of investment opportunity in the industry and about another 220,000 jobs. And certainly when we look at the profile of demand for particularly LNG, Australian LNG, out to 2040, it's very, very solid. Demand for liquefied natural gas in Asia will increase by about 52% between now and 2040. So there's a wonderful opportunity here for Australia to play a major role and continue to deliver benefit to our economy, but also to those economies to the north of us.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing your insights. They're so valuable working so closely in the space. And for the lay people that don't really have access to those stats, so thanks for that. And as the world fights the harmful effects of climate change through carbon emissions, LNG has come into the spotlight. How is Australia's supply of LNG placed for future demands, please?
Yeah, look, we are very well placed. I mean, I think the first and most important point to make is that we as an industry and we as an association absolutely support the science of climate change and, putting in place those policies that are going to deliver net zero by 2050. In terms of our industry, the growth opportunity to the north, as I said before, the increase in demand of around 52%. We see short-term increases in demand across the world of about 8% between now and 2025. And liquefied natural gas plays a really important role in firming up an electricity system as it shifts to a greater uptake of renewables. So, for example, here in Australia, and then particularly in the Asian economies as they switch from coal to gas, what we see is that using natural gas in the electricity system, natural gas has about half the carbon emissions of coal. And even here in Australia, we see that the overall emissions profile of natural gas, when we look across the entire energy grid, is lower than the average emissions profile of the grid. So it's a very, very effective tool. And the Australian government has estimated that the use of natural gas could result in emissions reduction of about 170 million metric tonnes if countries were to switch to using natural gas. And I think what we have to understand is that as we look to the transition of energy, if you like, and as we look to how we move towards net zero by 2050, we have to make sure that we don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Last year, 83% of the world's energy came from hydrocarbons, which includes natural gas. So we need to look at ways in which we can help decarbonise hydrocarbons, decarbonise natural gas, whilst maintaining energy security. And I think that's the real opportunity for Australia as we think through what's Australia's role. We can help with the transition to greater renewables. We can help with the decarbonising of natural gas through techniques like carbon capture and storage, and the industry is extraordinarily well placed to support the development of a hydrogen industry as well. So, for Australia being so geographically well located to Asia, where the population growth is, with our vast natural resources, our ability to decarbonise natural gas, I think we have a wonderful opportunity to help in that transition and to continue to supply into that market. And you mentioned there about prices. Well, one of the best ways to keep downward pressure on prices is to continue to ensure supply. And last year, Australia exported around $50 billion worth of natural gas to Asia, and that will certainly continue if we can get the policy settings right to continue the development of the resource.
So thank you so much for sharing your insights there. The UK and the US are experiencing an energy crunch at the moment in regards to the LNG prices. How does Australia's gas code of conduct come into play here? Do you think Australia will follow suit, and will we see a surge in the prices of energy as well?
Well, look, we're not seeing that at the moment, and in fact, when you look at Australian gas prices compared to gas prices across Asia, we are lower than all of our major, let's call it manufacturing competitor countries, and there is at the present point in time a significant gap between the price we're seeing in Asia, which is quite high, and where we are in Australia, and the code of conduct itself the code of conduct is not about pricing. That's about ensuring that the way in which participants behave in the marketplace is transparent and effective and efficient. That's not about pricing. If we want to talk about pricing, the best response to keeping downward pressure on prices here in Australia is to get more supply into the market. That's simple economics. If you have demand, you increase supply, your price will come down, and that's where we really need to focus on, and making sure that we have a very deep and liquid market here in Australia. So work around the development of the Wallumbilla hub, which the government is committed to doing. I think that's very, very important. It's about ensuring transparency, and the ACCC has just completed its work around the transparency in the marketplace. And what we want to see is policies from government that continue to encourage exploration so that gas can come into the market. That's what's going to keep the pressure on prices and keep that downward pressure on prices. So, for example, the development of the Narrabri opportunity, the lifting of moratoriums in Victoria, the development of the Beetaloo Basin in the Northern Territory, these are the things that will keep the downward pressure on price. It never works to have governments try and regulate a price outcome in the market. Let the market work, get the supply into the market. That will get you the right price outcome.
It sounds like Australia is definitely well positioned to make a good use of those opportunities that are coming our way, hopefully, with expansion of the renewable space and how liquid natural gas will play a part in that. And it's exciting news about the development of the underwater pipeline to mine liquid natural gas from WA's offshore Scarborough gas field, and to be transferred to Woodside's Pluto LNG facility beginning from 2023. How resilient do you believe is WA's nearshore gas mining facilities to continue despite danger to certain protected marine species?
Yeah, look, the natural gas industry and the oil industry has been working closely, with the fishing community and the marine community for more than 60 years. We are very well practiced at being able to coexist. And what we can be very confident of here in Australia is that we have a world-class regulator in NOPSEMA. We have one of the best and most rigorous regulatory regimes, environmental regulatory regimes in the world. And what we've seen over the last 50 to 60 years is that the industries can coexist, and I think we can have every confidence that we are able to access the significant resources that we have on the Northwest Shelf, for example, being able to coexist. I mean, if you look at the King Reef project off the Northwest Shelf, it's a fabulous example of a reef being able to essentially exist with the oil and gas industry, and right through the process from development of the resource, life cycle of the resource, decommissioning of the resource. We are absolutely committed to ensuring that we can coexist. And our record and performance to date would certainly underscore that. Whether it be on the Northwest Shelf, whether it be off the shore in Darwin, whether it be in the Bass Strait, the industry has an enviable record of being able to extract what is a wonderful resource for Australia and the world, but being able to coexist safely with the fishing community, with the marines community, to make sure that we can both benefit from the wonderful resources that we have in Australia. So we can be really confident with the frameworks we have in place that both can happen.
Yes, Australia does have a beautiful coastline. It would be great to keep it looking that way. But I think the new technologies that have developed as well in rehabilitation and sustaining the natural environment through mining infrastructure has improved, and hopefully it'll continue. So green hydrogen is pulsing these days and is an emerging renewable resource that is gaining a lot of attention. How will the mining of liquid natural gas in Australia play a role in the production of green and blue hydrogen, please?
Yeah, well, look, I mean, Australia is wonderfully placed with the existing technology we have to be a world leader in the production of hydrogen. And in particular, if you look at, there was some recent research by Energy Quest, and they pointed to actually the real opportunity for Australia and the real growth opportunity is hydrogen from natural gas. That's the most economically sensible equation and the most efficient and effective means. So when you couple, for example, the production of blue hydrogen with carbon capture and storage to offset the emissions, you have a very economically attractive product. And our industry, our business is producing, storing, and moving natural gas, and hydrogen is a gas. So the processes and the systems are very, very similar. And natural gas and its conversion into blue hydrogen is a well-known, well-understood process. It allows us to get scale. One of the challenges with production of green hydrogen, at least in the short to near term, is scale, whereas we can produce blue hydrogen at scale now, and that will give us a wonderful opportunity to then move that product into the very energy hungry markets of Asia. And our industry, we believe, with our expertise in producing gas, storing gas, moving gas, in carbon capture and storage, which helps offset the emissions from the production process, those two things combined are the real opportunity. And if you look at some recent work by the International Energy Agency, they looked out to 2050, and their view was that by 2040, 2050, the world will be producing around 568 million tonnes of hydrogen, coupled with carbon capture and storage, and that's Australia's sweet spot. That's what we can do, and that's what we're focused on. So we see that that's where the real opportunity is. Yes, there will be a place and an avenue for green hydrogen, but when we talk about hydrogen at scale and playing to Australia's natural advantages, where the real opportunity is in the production of blue hydrogen combined with CCS, looking at our geographical proximity to Asia. You put those three things together, it's a wonderful, wonderful opportunity for our industry for future growth.
Thank you so much for sharing those valuable insights, Andrew. That's fantastic, because it's such a new technology, a new resource, that I'm sure the viewers are keen to hear more about it. And Australia is an oil producer ranking about 31st in the world. Why do Australian refineries continue to import oil from the Asian reserves? Could you help us understand this a bit better? And how do the global oil supply and processing levels impact Australia's ability to profit from oil exports? Does this affect the price of the crude oil as well?
Yeah, look, I mean, it's a question of supply. There was a point in history where Australia was producing about 86% of its oil needs. But when you go out and you explore for oil and gas, sometimes you're lucky, sometimes you're not. And the simple reality of the economics of producing oil at the moment, so finding and producing oil, are simply not attractive for Australia. It just makes more economic sense to be importing oil from countries like Malaysia, where it's processed in Singapore and then shipped and stored here. You've also got the cost of refining, and unfortunately Australia is quite a high cost environment in which to conduct that sort of work. So the producing and refining of oil, it makes more economic sense for it to be imported, and we've seen that with the closure of a number of oil refineries. And what we've seen over the last 30 years is that we've been able to produce much more natural gas, both offshore and onshore, but we haven't been in a position to find and produce as much oil, and hence the shift to bringing that in from overseas. In terms of the impact of oil on the marketplace, I mean, yes, we do see a global market both in gas and the price of oil in Australia that is very much linked to global prices. Brent crude, for example, has a major impact on the price of oil here in Australia, and it is the case that a lot of our gas contracts are also oil-linked contracts. So the two are very, very much linked together, very symbiotic. But the question around why aren't we producing and refining oil here in Australia is one of supply. We don't have as much oil as we used to in terms of production and economics. You know, the amount that we have versus being able to import it already refined makes more economic sense than importing a raw crude product and refining it here. And I think that's a reflection of, you know, it is challenging to undertake some industries in Australia that have particularly high labour component costs that require large-scale capital investment that, you know, might be able to be done elsewhere. So it's about comparative advantage, and at the moment, you know, the comparative advantage for Australia is in the exploration of natural gas, production of natural gas, liquefying that and exporting it overseas. The economics of oil for Australia don't stack up from a production point of view at the moment, and hence you see that importation, you know, happening. That doesn't mean, and I should stress this point, that we are in any way, you know, insecure for oil. We have in place long-term agreements that ensure the security of oil in Australia. We have, you know, extensive storage. We have relationships with countries in Asia, with the United States, to ensure Australia's oil security. So we shouldn't be worried about that. It's just we have a different plan in place now, if you like, compared to, say, 20 years ago when we were almost self-sufficient in oil production.
Right, that's very interesting. Thank you so much for sharing the insights there. And we're reaching the end of the discussion now. And you did mention a little bit about the potential for job creation in the liquid natural gas industry a bit earlier in the discussion. And the oil and gas industry, from some statistics I came across recently, produces close to 80,000 jobs for Australians, directly and indirectly. Do you believe this will be sustained into the future?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you look at the demand profile for natural gas and the growth of population in Asia, as I mentioned before, you know, demand for natural gas is forecast to increase by 52% between now and 2040. Between now and 2025, you know, production of natural gas in Australia is forecast to increase from 108 billion cubic metres to 125 billion cubic metres. So you've got this production and demand profile. And, you know, we did some work recently with EY where we said, okay, if we can get all of the policy conditions right to support growth, so we get investment, we get exploration. In fact, what we will see is, you know, another $350 billion of investment and up to 220,000 jobs could still be generated in the industry. We look back the last decade, $450 billion of investment. Right now in the pipeline, we have you know, upwards of $130 billion of projects you know, waiting to go. So when you look at demand, you look at investment, you look at the growth opportunities for Australia, the fact that we're blessed with an enormous supply of natural gas, I think the opportunities are, you know, absolutely world-class and outstanding. And, you know, we should see growth of that 80,000 jobs to a, you know, 150, 200,000 job scenario over the next, you know, 10 to 20 years. And they are good jobs. They are high-paying jobs. You know, it's almost double the national wage average for a job in the oil and gas industry. They're highly technical. They're using world-class science. I mean, it is absolutely a very, very exciting opportunity for Australia and for anyone who wants to get in the industry. So I have absolutely no doubt that we will go from strength to strength and, you know, create new opportunities and continue to grow that 80,000 into something bigger.
Great, thank you so much for sharing your insights. It's a very exciting space, as you say, at the moment with the emerging of new resources, and I'm sure there's going to be a lot of training and development for people who are interested in the space if they get into it now. So thanks so much for your time, Andrew. That discussion was very, very valuable. And viewers, if you've just joined us, we had a very inspiring discussion about Australia's position in natural resources and the production and exploration of liquid natural gas here in Australia. And that was with Mr. Andrew McConville, the CEO of the Australian Petroleum Production and Exploration Association. The full recorded interview will be available from the YouTube channel, 𝐊𝐚 Media, in the next couple of days. And thanks for your time, viewers. Stay tuned for more live updates. And as we say, stay apprised and invest wise with 𝐊𝐚.